Welcome to the EcoParent Podcast Network. I'm Sam, the founder of EcoParent magazine. My partner Alexis and I had zero experience in the publishing industry, no money, and a new baby. But we quit our jobs, leapt into the unknown, and started EcoParent magazine anyway. It was absolutely freaking terrifying. But at the same time, it felt right. Just a few years into the journey, Alexis was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer that later found its way to her brain. It was utter chaos, navigating treatment schedules, caring for a 3-year-old, and trying to run a fledgling business, not to mention the general emotional havoc. Alexis didn't make it, but the rest of us did, and I've spent the years since raising a wonderful son and building EcoParent into North America's top print magazine for conscientious families. Even 10 years in, we're still a very small crew. If you send an email, it's probably me that will answer you. And this podcast network is a monumental step for us, another leap into the unknown. But like before, it just feels right. And I know that Alexis would agree that the podcasting team I've assembled here is an incredible group of people whose only goal is to inspire the best in you. Okay, I'm going to shut up now and let you listen to the podcast. Thank you so much for stopping by. You're the reason we do what we do.
My boys were the first generation in our family to have food sensitivities. And even way back when they were 4 or 5, and I was feeding them all the foods that they were reacting to, I kept saying, I think it's the food. Like, you'll eat pizza and then they'll go berserk. Oh my gosh, what a game changer.
Hello, parents, and welcome to the Feeding Families podcast. I have a guest with me today that I know you are going to totally love. She has so much to say about food, and I think you're going to learn a little something about the power of food today. And I also think that you're going to get inspired about what's possible by hearing her personal story and her journey through understanding food and also working through the challenges of feeding her 2 boys. So welcome, Lori Preshing.
Thanks so much for having me, Jess.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate you coming because your story, oh gosh, it goes way back now, right? Like, what, 18 years?
Yeah, 15 years. The boys are 18 and 19 now, and what a journey it has been.
Yeah, what a journey it has been. And so just by way of introduction, I want you all to know that Lori Preshing, who is my guest today, she is the mom of 2 wonderful boys, men now, aren't they? And she left her corporate job way back when she became really fascinated by the power of food and nutrition. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, in a nutshell, literally, I knew the satellite would be closed, and I couldn't have timed that better. I graduated, and they closed my satellite in the same week. So it was one door opens, another closed.
As it does, right? As it does when you're ready to look for the silver lining of things, right? And you started Allergies and Me, right? To help other families navigate the complex world of allergies and food sensitivities. So spoiler alert, her story has a lot to do with allergies and food sensitivities. Allergies and sensitivities, which are 2 different things that we can get into. It's a big topic. It is a big topic. I mean, I was just doing a little bit of digging before we came on here. And in Canada, Food Allergies Canada suggests that half of all family households are impacted by food allergy, and almost 500,000 children under the age of 18 have a food allergy. And that's just allergies. We're not even talking about sensitivities, and I'll get you to explain the difference. And then in the US, the estimate is 1 in 13 kids in the US has a food allergy. And I think if you went over to Australia and talked to the folks at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital Allergy Unit, who talk a lot about the impact of food intolerances and sensitivities, that those numbers would be a whole lot bigger. So this impacts a lot of people, probably more people than actually know that are impacted by it. So, and let's start there because you had no idea this was going to play such a big role in your life. Take us back to when you first figured out, something was going on with your boys and you needed to look a little bit more deeply into food.
It's just crazy, right? My boys were the first generation in our family to have food sensitivities. And even way back when they were 4 or 5, and I was feeding them all the foods that they were reacting to, I kept saying, I think it's the food. Like, he'll eat pizza and then they'll go berserk. And what are you talking about? It's just food. And getting the grandparents on board was another challenge too. Like, that didn't exist in their generation. Think of it as a sliding scale. Right? You can have intolerance on one end, maybe you break out in a little rash or hives now and then it can slide into sensitivities where you can get headaches, you can get rashes, you can get eczema, and then you slide into the full-blown allergy, right? And that goes all the way to anaphylaxis. And by the way, like, going through the list of symptoms of my boys, I'll take you to then. So they're 4 and 5, very picky eaters. And oh my God, gastro, weird random headaches, eczema coming out all over the place, like repeating after repeating. Like, we just kept looking for answers, but nobody had any answers. We would go to specialists and GPs and we'll try this cream, try that cream, but nothing changed and nothing helped. So we were exhausted, right? Because they were also not only just hyperactive, but sleep was really, really bad. And that's what I see a lot. They would wake up for hours during the night, just laughing and playing around. And we're like, hey, this is not normal. They're growing boys. They're in a growth spurt as toddlers, right? They should be sleeping because that's when they're growing. So finally, my nutritionist said, why don't you just do like a food sensitivity test? Never heard of it. Oh my gosh, what a game changer. So we did that and we did a blood test. And if you want, we'll get into the different kinds of testing because I put the boys through it all. So anyway, that first food allergy test. God. The IgG antibodies were just all over the place and especially high for the foods that they were eating the most. So that's all the wheat, that's all the gluten, and that was all the dairy. It was all the dairy. They also had potatoes and things like pineapple. So a quick peek at the first allergy test ever done. It was a bar graph way back then. And the line that goes right off the charts was pineapple.
Random, huh?
That was the start of our journey, literally a pineapple, because how healthy could you get, right? A fresh cut pineapple. So I would buy them whole, cut them up, and he would have it every day. And that's all he asked for. That was the one word that he asked for all the time. He asked for pineapple all the time and he wanted to eat it. So I thought, great, that's healthy. But when I saw this, what? This showed me that it was actually hurting him, right? Though those antibodies go right off the page, it's hurting him. So that was one of the first foods that went, of course, immediately gone. And guess what? By the next week, his hyperactivity was gone. He actually sat down and watched his little Winnie the Pooh. We got calls from the daycare going, what'd you do? He's all like calm and everything. And that was it. That was it. We knew we were on to something from that one food. And then from there, just one step at a time. Then we tried the dairy next. Okay, how do we pull? How do we replace? And this was 15 years ago, right?
Yeah, things were very different 15 years ago, from access to different foods, and also the testing is all different. And I want to just pull out a couple of things that you said, because I think they're so important. One was that the symptoms were all over the map, right? There were so many things ranging from skin things to behavior things to sleep things. I'm sure poop things probably. Were there poop things?
Yep.
Yeah. So as a parent, you're thinking like, what's going on? My kid is all over the map, and what is causing this? I mean, now I think it's a little bit more well talked about that, maybe foods could be impacting all of this vast range of symptoms. But back then, I'm sure it wasn't really talked about. So what kind of, when you started thinking this way, like, did you feel a little bit different? Like, did you get support? You mentioned you had a nutritionist, so someone was supporting you.
Oh my gosh, thank God, right? He was the one, because my health tanked. I had them very close. I had them like 14 months apart, and I needed support for myself. So that's where I found him, and he was a lifesaver. And then it just made sense that, oh, okay, you know what? Now we'll have the answers because no one else did. But that was all foreign to me too, right? And that was our first step. But no, there wasn't a whole lot of support. We were told by our GP that we're harming them by putting them on this diet. And even though we had the test showing that this is hurting them, so we eventually left. Finding your team and finding practitioners that are on the same page as you. We learned that the hard way as well, but that's a big piece of it.
Finding your team is so important, and finding the right tools for your toolbox, right? Like you wanted to use this tool for your toolbox. Some doctors are very well trained in the use of food and some aren't. So you sort of have to look around and find the people who will support you with doing this. The other thing I wanted to point out, how we use these tests, because I use them also in my practice and see, these IgG antibodies very high sometimes. And I think that's a little bit misunderstood sometimes between people who use these tests or people who are not familiar with these tests, because IgG antibodies are memory antibodies. So of course they're going to be elevated when you're eating a lot of those foods, but these tests are calibrated so that, if something is off the charts, that is an abnormal IgG reaction. So yes, probably because he was eating a lot of pineapple, it was going to be a little bit elevated, but not that far, right? So we can use these, and I think you use them the same way in your practice. We can use these to kind of guide our choices, guide our experiments. They're not definitive, like you don't have a diagnostic test here. There's not a diagnosed allergy, but it gives you some more information so you can do some tests on your own with these foods.
That's perfectly said. That's exactly how I use them. And you know what? I'll get into the different types of testing because we did them all. And that's exactly how I use them, as pieces of the puzzle and as, how you say that, second opinions of each other, right? So now today, 15 years later, I have so many families, one, on the waiting list to see an allergist. That's the first test that they're going to do, is that prick test, right? So you get the needle on the skin and you see which reacts and blows out and hive. And I always say, okay, those were great. We did those, but those were great for our environment, right? Dust, pollen, dander, like that showed up for my boys. Yeah. And then the other one that we also tried, we used a naturopath. So that was another member of our team. And it's called either a bioresonance or a bioenergetic test. And what it is like non-invasive. You just hold these wands. And what it does is it just tests your energetic reading, really neat software. They explain everything to you, but you can see, which organs are under stress, and then you can see which foods are not resonating with you. I find that was fascinating, but those are also really, really sensitive. I have people who do that test as a first test, and they come to me with these lists of pages that, okay, do not eat all these foods, but they're super, super sensitive. So if you even have a mild reaction, it might show up as like moderate or high. So okay, it was another marker. I think I used that for my youngest when all his blood markers were gone. Literally, like I was one of those, I would test every year and watch the markers come down. And then I just wanted to see, because he still was reacting to something, I used that test to see, okay, what was going to pop out. And it's true. Sulfates and nitrites. He was my tough one because back then he would eat a hot dog and his lips would swell. So that is anaphylactic territory, right? Also 15 years ago, brand new to us. So we were like, what's an EpiPen? And that didn't make sense. I wanted to get to the root. Why are his lips swelling in the first place? So learning about nitrates and sulfites and then cutting that all out, all deli meat's gone. It never happened again. And then the last test, now I'm finding that they're using a stool test. So you can actually test for those elevated IgGs in a stool sample. So for the stool test, the stool sample comes back with those elevated IgG markers that you can get from stool, and what foods to stay away from. So that's brand new that I've seen. I've been introduced to this new company, and I have a few families going through it for the first time.
Yeah, and the stool samples will also test IgA antibodies, which is also really helpful. I mean, I think the take-home point is that there's a lot of ways to look at these things, but they're not diagnostic tests. They're just guides to help you make some choices and accelerate your progress. Because like you're saying with the nitrates, you wouldn't have known to try that, to taking that family of foods out, or the pineapple. You wouldn't have known to even try that had you just been doing a sort of trial and error method. I mean, this is really challenging for parents, right? It's like, okay, so you discovered the power of foods that way, right? Like the interaction between food and the body is so vast, right? Food touches every corner of the body and it can impact everything from the skin to the brain to the eyes to the ears to the whatever, everything. So it can be really overwhelming for families who are just trying to get food on the table, right? Maybe their kids are picky in the first place to do a test like this and get things out. I would say the number one hesitation that when I meet with families who are like considering changing their child's diet, the first thing that they say is, I'm really worried you're going to make me take all kinds of foods out of my diet. So what do you suggest could sort of temper that fear? Because clearly it's an avenue worth pursuing, but it feels really hard. And so a lot of parents give up before they even start.
A couple of things. Because, yeah, same thing. I have a lot of parents who stop at that first test because once you get that back, you have black and white proof that you can't be eating these foods. And we all know like food stems from so many things, right? It's cultural, it's family, it's psychology, it's comfort, it's what you grow up with. So two things that I'm going to say then, if your people aren't ready to take that test, fine. Guess what? It's a mindset change. The kids are resilient and they get it. They get it. Kids understand. So we started changing. They're like 5 and 6 at this time. We started watching documentaries. So we started watching Food Matters and Michael Pollan and Super Size Me and what are they doing to the cows? What are they doing to the chickens? And we learn all this together. What? A cow should live 11 years, but they're fed what? GMO corn, and now they live 4 years. And what is going into the antibiotics and steroids and what? Like when you learn this stuff, you can't unlearn it. So then when you go to eat it, you have to make a conscious decision. What you just learned, do I want to eat that? No. So then each documentary, oh, okay, water. What are they putting in the water? All right, get a water filter. Maybe I should go find a butcher. Maybe I should go visit a farmer's market and have a look at local and ask some questions, pesticides versus, what's regulated. So each documentary watch and ask questions. We did it all together. God, I remember them watching Super Size Me. Like, it was so simple, right? This man ate McDonald's. This man threw up. I do not want to eat McDonald's.
Yeah, that's such a great piece of advice, Lori. I think we often as parents, we feel like, oh, I don't want to deprive my kid. I don't want them to feel different. I don't want them, you feel like you're imposing something on them. But this mindset shift of no, we're not going to eat this stuff because it's not nourishing for our bodies right now. And helping your kids understand why that is. How old were they when you started this again?
5, 6.
5 and 6 years old. Like they're never too young to really start. I talk about it with my the families that I work with as developing a culture of nourishment in your home. Here's how we make food decisions, and here's why we make food decisions in our home. And then all of a sudden it's harder to give them the cotton candy at the fair than it is to pack your own snacks.
Completely. And the other thing that I would say to that too is do a 30-day challenge. Those seem to be like trending or the rage or something like that. But I mean, if you make it a game, if the kids are young, you put a calendar on the fridge and, you put some incentives, prizes, whatever in there, and you just do a 30-day challenge for the whole family because you got to decide, do you want to go all in? Kids emulate. They don't do what you say. They do what you do. So do you want to change the way you're eating as well as a parent, right? So we did. So the 30-day challenge, dairy is one of the top of the list. So that's what I'm telling my folks, and they're responding to it, right? They're like, oh, you know what? It sounds like a game. I think we can do that. 30 days. Watch what happens when all dairy is removed. Take out the cheese and the yogurt and the ice cream and the milk. What happens? And you will be shocked at the symptoms that disappear at the end of those 30 days.
Yeah. I mean, gamification, right? That's the thing right now, right? Everybody's trying to gamify stuff because we know that the games are addictive, right? In a good way and also in a bad way. Yeah, I love that too. And setting a time frame around things, I think, really helps as well. It also helps when parents are not on the same page. You see this a lot when parents are not on the same page around what they want to do, with the kind of experiments that they want to do with food. Then setting a time frame is really helpful for that. And what kind of time frame do you suggest? Like, how long is a long enough time to see some results?
Well, we know dairy is cleared after 2-3 weeks. So that's why I would say the 30-day challenge for dairy works wonders. And people are always in shock. And then from there, make the decision. Do you want to keep going? Or are you like, oh, it was really hard and, we didn't really see too much of a difference. So like you can make your decision at that point. But I always say, give that a try. For wheat and gluten, it takes a little bit longer, but I have some people who have like with extreme symptoms, right? Like, and we're talking like gastro, bloating or bad reflux, like you're like maybe headaches, body aches and pains. So depending on the severity of symptoms that you have, like how much further do you want to go? So I work with where they're at, right? If they're responding to that 30-day challenge, if they like it, or if they're really severe and they want to go all in, then yeah, a couple of months, give it a try. And I always say it's not forever. And yes, I do hear that a lot, where I'm depriving my child. When we saw that allergy test, it's the mindset changes. This food is not nourishing them. It's actually hurting them. If food could do this, then different foods could heal them.
Yeah. So let's get into that a little bit about the healing part, because like you said, this doesn't need to be forever. This is not a diagnosis of an allergy. This isn't a life sentence. This is just showing you that there are certain foods that are causing inflammation and irritation in the body, and that inflammation and irritation is causing symptoms. Let's talk about reintroducing foods. How often do you see that, you take foods out for a little while? How long is a while? And then how successfully can you then reintroduce foods and expand the diet again?
Ugh, every child is so different, right? They're all like snowflakes, bio-individuality, right?
I mean, it's all going to depend on the situation.
Yeah. Like I have had some, because what I've seen so far is the younger the child, the faster they bounce back. I can tell you that. Like under 3, I've had like as young as 1, picky eating, they cut out all the milk, they did the probiotics, and less than a year. And then you know what? They didn't want to introduce a lot of the thing. The only thing they brought back was cheese. And cheese caused constipation, which then they managed by, okay, once a week we'll treat with cheese, right? So when you start to correlate these things, there's that conscious eating piece. I'm going to eat this, and this is how I'm going to pay for it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes it's worth it, right? It's like, yes, I'm going to have the bowl of ice cream, and I know that tomorrow I'm going to be grumpy and my eczema is going to flare, but at least I know that that's what it is, because then I'm going to take the ice cream away and I'm not going to eat it for another little while. But right now, it's worth it. Hey parents, this episode of the Feeding Families podcast is being brought to you by the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. Want to learn to cook healthier for your family? Looking for meal planning and food shopping tips for your busy lifestyle? Maybe you'd like to brush up on some cooking techniques and get some holistic nutrition and recipe tips. The Holistic Culinary Certificate workshops offered by CSNN are open to everyone. Some of the workshops include cooking for kids, alternative baking and raw sweets, probiotic foods and beverages, and international cuisines, just to name a few. They're available at select CSNN branches. You can learn more at csnn.ca/holistic-family or follow the links in the show notes. I think that's like the ultimate for parents is to raise kids who can make conscious decisions about their food and know what's causing what.
And it comes faster than you realize when you just like, that's what we did. That's our bond. It was the journey together. We all learned together. We watched these documentaries, asked questions, started correlating foods, making a food diary. Okay. Because I remember when they were like close to 9, 10, they started themselves. My son would be like, my stomach hurts a little bit. Okay, what did you do yesterday again? Oh, I went to grandpa's and we had pizza. So it's that mind shift. And I always say, like now, like 15 years later, there's like so much out there on the market. So that cow documentary we watched, I literally to this day cannot eat ice cream without imagining like what's in it. and anyway, I was like, I can't. So now I just have coconut ice cream, and that's my treat, plant-based, right? So you can have a treat for everything. So it's just a mindset shift. You're not depriving yourself. It's finding new treats that will nourish the body.
And I think sometimes parents worry about creating fear around food and labeling foods as bad. And I'd love for you to speak about that. I think there's a difference between making conscious choices around food and having fear around bad foods. What do you think about that?
Oh, yeah, because then I've seen the other end of the spectrum too. I'm going to go all the way to the other side just for the fear, just for a second, because I now have like There's a new generation of baby being born. So you have anaphylactic mothers who have these babies, and they're really, really severe. Like they have difficulty eating, like anything, breaking down proteins, and they're colicky, and they're burping, and they're throwing up. And these moms are terrified, right? Like, oh my God, what do I do? And who can help me? Because it's not really well known. These like FPIES, that condition where they can't digest protein. It's not really, it's really, really new. So these moms are terrified. And that's that whole other end of the extreme, right? And I get it. Because having an EpiPen and anaphylactic, there's that fear. That EpiPen is forever tied with fear. But again, we were walking that road. We were on the cusp of having that EpiPen when we found out what the food triggers were, and we removed them. Probiotics and ferments and bone broths and coconut oils and aloe vera and the things to bring down the inflammation and soothe the intestinal tract. Like we never saw that again. It never came back again. So I always say that sliding scale, you know what I mean? It goes both ways when you start making changes and removing the foods. So no, fear doesn't have to be a part of it, right? As long as I think person connects with a practitioner, and that person gets them, and that person helps them baby step within their comfort zones. I don't think fear has to be part of the equation, but I do get it.
Yeah, I get it too. I mean, gosh, I'm thinking also of like orthorexia, right? Of just like fear of foods. We don't want to instill that in our kids. I think personally, language is really important. And I always suggest that parents sit down even for 5 minutes. I mean, how often do you like ships passing in the night? You never see each other, right? And really consider the language that you're going to use around food. My favorite word is nourishment. We're gonna choose foods that are nourishing to our bodies, and those are going to be different foods for different people. And I think as long as you keep the framework around nourishment, that fear piece kind of dissipates a bit.
I'm so glad that you said that, because that whole thing of being on board. So you have the two parents in a household, they have to be on the same page moving forward, right? Because if they're not, the kids will know who to go to, or they'll be sabotage, or they'll be let's go out and I'll give them this. You got to be on the same page. So having that frank conversation with your spouse, are we going to do this together? Are we going to do this as a family? Like, for our children, with whatever symptoms they have, maybe they just got a diagnosis. Do we want to make that change? Being on that same page, so key to move forward. And they become your rock. Because I remember, like, it wasn't easy, right? One thing at a time. And I still was like crying in the pantry some days. What am I going to feed them? But when I was down, my spouse picked me up. And when he was like, okay, this is really hard, so I was there. No, we can do this. So we got through one step at a time, always on that same page.
Yeah, one step at a time. That's really good advice of just taking the steps, because when your child is struggling, like you want to help them yesterday, right? You want to just like go all in, and that's a good recipe for burnout and disaster from what I've seen. Is that what you see?
Yeah, that's for example, I have families who have the test done and they bring it, and that's it. We're totally going to clean out the pantry and 100% do it from day one. That's setting you up for failure. Right? It's so overwhelming to start reading ingredient labels, and it's impossible to clean out the pantry. And I hate wasting food. So I'm always like that. That's where I go, the one step at a time, one food at a time, one meal at a time. It's like, okay, you ran out of the canola oil. Guess what? For your next one, buy coconut oil, buy olive oil, try a bean dish, just one thing at a time.
That's a good word to think about too, swap. Instead of avoiding things, just swap them.
Yeah.
So if you're going to take out this, what are you going to replace it with?
That you're right. Because when you just said that, oh, I'm afraid you're going to remove all these foods. Like they just hear remove, but they have it's just a bad connotation, right? Swap is perfect because it's so much easier. For example, if someone is a family or something, they're addicted to pasta. That's all they want to eat. Well, you know what? There's amazing bean pastas right now that taste exactly the same texture, and that's our new favorite right now, like lentils, chickpeas, you name it, you can get it now in a pasta. You can swap them, and you can even sometimes combine them. If you have like a super picky eater who's maybe like very texture sensitive, or is gonna just notice anything right away, you might
You might do, a quarter of the new stuff and 3/4 of their old stuff, and try to just sort of push it out. That's another kind of way of thinking about it. Another framework. You're pushing stuff out. You're not just, ripping it out.
No, that's a really point too, because the sensory piece is there, right? The sensory is either to color or to texture or to taste. So I literally had a mom out of town, this amazing mom, 4-year-old girl. Her daughter would drink 8 glasses of milk a day and not want to eat. So the mom, like your mom intuition is like, something's wrong. Like, she should be eating foods. She's 4. Like, nope. And she was addicted, and it just removed her appetite. So this mom had to slowly start introducing almond milk into the cow's milk, slowly, like, you know what I mean? And slowly, taste change, till one day the cow's milk was gone and she started eating.
Yeah, because at that point, you're probably breaking a chemical addiction too, right? It's not only just the comfort and the familiarity and the taste that they love, but it's a chemical addiction as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's blocking something. Like, and the mom knew, not knowing, and she just knew, like, okay, it's not normal for her to not be hungry and not want to eat. Something else is at play here. So I want this milk gone. Help me do this. And she did. And incredible things happened. She started talking, the headbanging went away. Like, the stories are incredible. But
wow.
it's still in that if you just swap it out, the trigger or the allergen, you can then correlate the symptoms because the symptoms disappear.
Tell me if you've seen this too. So I sometimes see people will, especially if they do the slow pushing out process, they'll push foods out, then they'll be like, yeah, I don't know if I really saw much of a difference. And so we'll reintroduce the food, and boom, like they're like, oh my gosh, the headaches came back. I didn't even notice that they were gone, or the insomnia, or the night waking, or the bedwetting. And so they notice these things once they bring the foods back in, not so much when they push them out. Sometimes I see that.
Exactly. I see that all the time. And I explain it too, like, what you've done is you've just calmed the body down, like calming the immune system down. You've calmed the inflammation down. So if you like go a week or 2 and then you have like just a small portion of it, boom, your body goes on red alert again, and you're going to get a huge spike in all those symptoms that, slowly dissipated, that you forget about. So it's almost like that awareness of a new baseline of health. But they're gonna cheat, and they're gonna bring it back, and then, oh God, and they
and that's where the conscious decision making comes in, right? You're like, okay, if we're gonna go to this birthday party and we know there's gonna be pizza, ice cream, and cake there, do we want to go and just say, okay, well, tomorrow is gonna be a crazy day because we're gonna eat all this stuff? Or do we want to go and bring our own foods? Or do we just not want to put ourselves in that situation and we want to go do something else that's fun?
That's really well said, because there are always options that you can do. And any one of those is reasonable, right? Because it's like, if you're going to cheat, then like get something really good quality, like get a really nice imported chocolate or cake, or, go all out, or make something that is nutrient dense from home, or just pass altogether. We've done all of the above, and we make that decision as a family.
Yeah. And you get to a certain point with your kids where you can bring them into that decision. That's really exciting as a parent.
Yeah. And it's so funny because when I see that now, because it's heavy on the, like, I'm depriving my child. I didn't have that mindset back then, because like I was able to just flip it very soon in. And again, the test did that for me, right? So I was with that mom that, I brought my homemade pizza and little cupcakes for my boys, and we still went to the birthday parties, and you know what? They didn't even notice. They're busy playing with their friends. They like eat for 5 minutes, gobble, 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 yay. And they go off again to the gym. Like mine, honestly, looking back, they didn't notice.
That's so interesting. I mean, sometimes we project these things onto our kids, I think, right? We're so worried. And they're like, well, whatever.
The other thing that I wanted to add was they fought me at first. Like, it was not easy. Like, mine were tantruming, and they would throw themselves on the ground at the supper table. They would only eat 4 things. Like, I was like, and it was like, this is not good. And that it was one point I need to start giving them, but they won't eat it. No. So smoothies became my best friends. And then we started like doing the blood tests, looking at all their vitamins and minerals. What are they low in? So then I started supplementing all the probiotics and the omegas and everything all went into smoothie. And then I would give them that. Like I would make it thick like a yogurt and like covered it with coconut. And they started eating that. And at one point, like the things come on. And then everything changed. Like I always say the children at some point will start to feel better inside. And then a light goes on, like everything mom is doing for me is to make me feel better. And that's what I also kept saying. I'm doing this so you can feel, I'm giving you this so you'll feel better. And when they get it, when they start feeling better, everything shifts. That's the tipping point. It's like, boom,
Mm.
okay, give me all those vitamins. And they are all in. And that's what I've seen with my families. Like when the moms finally get to that point, they're like, oh my God, he loves the smoothies because he feels so great after that. Because all of you've just supplemented vitamins, extra minerals, some omegas, and maybe some superfoods in there, and they feel amazing. So they are all in from that point on.
That is so important for everybody to hear, that it's hard at the beginning, but there is a point. It kind of like exercise, right? It's like it's hard at the beginning, but at some point it becomes fun and invigorating and energizing. And it's kind of like that. There's a tipping point, right? How I know everybody is different, but how long does that usually take? Assuming that you can be really diligent about taking the irritating foods out, and the other piece that you just said, which is so important, putting the nutrients in, getting nourishment in. What do you see in terms of that shift?
If the moms are all in, like I have had it happen for some kids less than a month, some maybe a couple of months, and then some longer than that. And that's because the parents aren't fully adhering to removing all of those inflammatory foods. So that icky is still there. So you can throw vitamins and all kinds of minerals and supplements, but if they're still eating those trigger foods, they're still not going to feel great. And I always say, like, if they're not feeling well inside, they're not going to be behaving well. Because that was my boys. Like they're disagreeable and tantruming, and I'm defiant, and I don't want to do that. And all that melted away. They started feeling better, started behaving better. Like it was like they became completely different children. And this is like, and we're entering 6, 7. I have these 2 pictures that sit on my nightstand. Picture of my son, because he wouldn't stay still. He was a runner. Like he would always run into traffic, oblivious of danger, never listened to us, screamed, ran in circles. A picture of us taking a pic, like we were holding him down and he's screaming, and we took a picture of it. I don't know why.
To remember the good old days.
I have that, and he's 2, and then I have one where he's 7, and the expression on his face. My husband just snapped the shot in the forest, and he has just such a peaceful look in his eyes, on his face, and he's so calm. I'm like, I have those 2 pictures side by side because for me that represents what we went through, right? So yeah, when they're feeling better and they're acting better, it just comes.
Yeah, I believe that too, and that's what I see as well. And that's why I wanted to have you on, Lori, because you had such a profound palm on the forehead moment of like, oh my gosh, it's the food, way early on in your parenting. So many parents, get deep into parenting. Their kids are, teens or early adults before they even consider that maybe something that they're eating is not agreeing with them. It's causing inflammation and irritation in the body. And I really dream of a time when considering food is one of the first things, if not the first thing to consider when a child starts to struggle with any kind of health issue, because it's just so powerful. And I think your story really, really highlights how powerful it can be. But also that it's like acknowledging that it's challenging because we live in a culture that doesn't think this way. And I'm sure you've had a lot of people over the years kind of give you the eye roll and the raised eyebrows of like, what are you doing to your kids? And maybe even thinking that you're damaging them somehow by depriving them of gluten or grains or dairy or what have you, right?
Yeah, that was a big fight with one of the grandparents because we decided not to do Halloween anymore. Candy is not the same. Candy is
Whoa.
just coloring and chemical and a glucose fructose. There's no natural so back then, me and my husband made a conscious decision. No, we're not doing Halloween. We're just going to do a shift. We're going to go and eat at grandma's house, or we're going to go for a nice meal and a movie. That's became the tradition, right? And I had a fight. I'm depriving them by not doing Halloween. when they would eat M&Ms, again, those colorings now that are proving to be shown, like in some countries, they label them right, not for children with a diagnosis. Those colorings set them off. They were berserk, climbing the walls, just screaming banshees. And you're just like, having two of them whirling dervish around the house. I was like, hey, no. So
Yeah, it becomes harder to give them the M&Ms than to actually, that's a bold move, like not doing Halloween. Like a lot of parents will be listening to this going, oh my gosh, that's totally impossible. But it's possible.
it is. We did it, and we made that decision together. And even now, like as a teen, even a few years back, I asked them one year, "Do you want to give out candy?" And they said, "No toys." Because that became our whole, I'm going to plug in for teal pumpkin, right? So the teal pumpkin means that you are a house that is aware that food allergies exist and you give out non-food. So every year we started giving out toys. And it was the perfect thing because I would just clean out, okay, what have you grown out? A puzzle, some video games, a baseball bat. And I would put it in a box or we would give it out. And it was always empty, always gone, everything gone, and, ready to be used by another family. So that became our tradition, and they liked that.
Tradition. I mean, it's the tradition. And so many of our traditions not only revolve around food, but revolve around not such good food either, right? How did we get to this point?
So again, you make that conscious decision too, as a couple, as the parents, right? Like, what traditions do you want to build for your house? Like we started that early on. And so to make a good meal, now we all meal prep together and we do a roast. And our big special, because we need to go back to that time, where you inherit family recipes from grandma and then it comes down to the kids. So my husband makes an aioli from scratch that is to die for. From his father, who got it from his father, and now he's teaching the boys it. And that is our tradition. We have lobster and homemade aioli sauce. And oh my God.
I'm going to come into your house. And so just to finish off, Lori, how are the boys doing now?
Oh, they're resilient. You know what? They get me through these times. And then the last 18 months have been a roller coaster. But you know what? We've evolved. We've learned together. We've done online training. We've started a family business. They come to me with the days that are really hard for me. And Mom, just take it one day at a time. And for food, they now are cooking full meals. Like my youngest, when they start, the first meal that he wanted to make was guacamole. He loves homemade guacamole. So they are now, and now he has expanded into this chef. He can make any sauce, pulled pork, aioli, like a nice lemon dill creamy sauce. Oh, like this child is becoming
and these kids were very picky eaters. You said at one point they were only eating 4 or 5 foods, right?
4 foods. Cheerios, Mini-Go, I can't believe just one step at a time. But I remember standing there praying and going, God, if I ever get out of this, I will show everybody how to do it.
Here you go. Here's your platform, Lori. That's amazing. And, I think it highlights such a beautiful story of how, in a lot of families, food has such a power to bring families together. And you see that cross culturally, you see that, in stories like this, but in a lot of families, it rips the family apart, right? Because parents are cooking 4 or 5 different meals, there's short order chefing, no one's got time, it's getting too expensive, kids won't eat it, there's battles and food, and it's just causes this major conflict. And so I think food is such an interesting tool that way. It has the power to bring families together. It has the power to pull families apart. And you just need to make some conscious decisions. And I think by the decisions that you made with your family, Lori, by recognizing it, whether you knew you were doing this or not, but recognizing it as a tool, you also taught your kids how to think critically and how to understand their body and how to make decisions. It's beautiful.
All those steps that we took, they can now see through the marketing. And that's a big piece of it too. Like you touched on it earlier, like the food that is marketed towards children is all just starch and corn and soy and wheat and dairy. That's it. And if the kids are eating these foods day in and day out, the probability that they develop an intolerance to it is higher, right? There's no variety, there's no rotation. It's all the same. So my kids now can see past the marketing, and we have a lot of conversation about that. You watch a TV show, you watch a commercial, and then we're like, oh, okay, what were they all about?
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I think we can end on that note, because it's so inspiring what you've managed to do with food, but also just to support your boys and to support your family and really bring your family together. And I am so, so grateful for the work that you're doing, helping other families navigate this really tricky situation, and come to an understanding that food is such a powerful tool and it can be your ally. You just need to learn how to use it constructively.
The last thing that I would want to add is what we talked about is finding your team. The importance of finding a practitioner that's on the same page as you is so crucial. Don't be forced or coerced into anything that doesn't feel right for your family, and that goes against your own intuition. Like, you know your children intimately, you know your body intimately. So find practitioners that are on the same page with you and constantly look for answers.
Yeah. Where can people find you, Lori, if they want to follow up with you?
Allergies, we're at allergiesandme.ca, or it's LORIP, Lori P at allergiesandme.ca.
Thank you so much for your time, Lori. I really, really appreciate all that you do. And thank you for coming.
It was a total pleasure. Thank you.
So, if you listen to podcasts or watch YouTube, you've probably heard it 1,000 times before. The plea to subscribe and leave a review or a comment. Well, here we are again. But seriously, the review is especially important to us, as it has a huge impact on our discoverability amongst the zillions of podcasts all competing for your attention. So please consider leaving a review. And heck, we'd really love to hear your feedback. This pilot episode of the EcoParent Podcast Network was made possible with the generous support of Ontario Creates. Thanks for listening.